Alright, so what's up you guys, it's your boy Danchou, and for today we are back with another video talking about the story behind the characters of Granblue, and this time we are discussing a character that will see a lot more spotlight down the line with a recent announcement, which will be Yuel. Now when I do these videos, my main goal is to inform those who got aware of these characters throughout Granblue Fantasy Versus, or those who are just poking their noses around in the world of Granblue and found their way here on accident or by searching a character of their interest. I myself have been playing Granblue for quite a while now, and over time I developed a serious passion for the game and the IP as a whole. It's my favorite out there as is, and being able to share info about these characters and the world of Granblue with others to perhaps spark that same excitement as I have for it is something I love to do. Previously I covered the story of Yuels, and I want to thank you guys for the overwhelming amount of support recently that has come towards my way to the channel. It's especially appreciated for the lore videos, as these videos do take quite some time to make. Now just before I start covering Yuel, if you guys do enjoy these type of videos and generally are just into Granblue Fantasy, whether that be the main game or the fighting game, then feel free to stick around on the channel by hitting that sub button. And if I'm not making videos here, then you can find me streaming GBVS on Twitch, so hopefully I'll see some of you guys there. Now first things first, who is Yuel? Yuel is a rather energetic female erune with a countryside accent that loves a good dinner and is somewhat of an airhead at times. But for the most part, she loves to tease her friends with innocent teasing as she ventures through the skies filled with curiosity about the world and what it all has to offer for her. Yuel is not a standard erune, however, as she is of royal lineage and inheritor of an ancient ancestral power which is called the Fox Flame. The main trait that gives away her royal background is her tail, as she is one of the few erunes who does have a tail, which you wouldn't normally see around. For example, Matera does not have one while Yuel has. Now there are a total of 9 royal families and Yuel belongs to the 3rd. Yuel and her blood of royal lineage have a very rich history that goes down 1,000 of years, and Yuel is more than determined to restore her royal family once more. And with her goal now set, she decided she would roam around the skies searching for remnants of this history that her lineage holds. But her curiosity tends to get the best of her, leading Yuel to find herself off track quite often, but she views such moments as only minor setbacks on the road of her big adventure. She's often found with a childhood friend which she is very close to, which will be Societe. Now these two are so close to each other, they both stated that they feel like they are siblings to describe their bond, and they're inseparable from each other. Saying one would die for the other would be an understatement. Now Societe is a very shy girl who loves to learn about all sorts of things she doesn't know about. On the contrary to Yuel, who is very energetic and outgoing, Societe is kind of the opposite. For example, she dislikes interacting with people, and along with disliking interaction, she can't stand people who talk way too fast. Now how did the crew get to meet these two? I think it's best to start off with the story of Yuel. One day the crew were out and about adventuring and happened to spot a smoke signal coming from a small island. When they headed to the signal to check it out, they bumped into a young erune woman. This will be Yuel. Now with the crew talking back and forth a bit, Yuel had explained that she was searching for sacred treasures to revive her long lost royal family. Now on top of explaining her plans and motives, she also explained that she had the ability to use the Fox Flame. And after the crew explained that they were skyfarers and what they were exactly doing before they decided to check out the smoke signal, Yuel got very excited. She thought to herself that perhaps if she were to follow along with the crew, she'd be able to accomplish her goal of finding these sacred treasures faster than on her own, whilst also having company along the way. And that is how it all started for Yuel and the crew. And then we still have Societe, who joined the crew in their adventures in a similar way as her best friend Yuel did. One day Societe came across the crew but stood silently before them. She didn't really say a word as she gazed in front of the people in front of her. And after a careful approach of the crew towards Societe, making sure to her that the crew means no harm or whatsoever, they managed to spark a little conversation. The crew eventually learns that Societe also seeks the same treasures as Yuel. In addition to these treasures, Societe was also looking for the successors of the royal bloodline to know more about the dances dedicated to Ninetales, as she was a descendant of the first royal family. Once the crew made clear that they had given Societe their full support in helping her, she opened up more about the rest of her intentions, as she didn't tell it in full the first time to avoid trouble for the crew, as she was afraid that they'd get stuck up in business they weren't involved in. Her true goal was to uncover the existence of Ninetales altogether, as it was only a mythical creature known through ancient stories that were passed on between the royal families for years. They also get to learn about the tragic backstory of Societe and her parents, as they have been killed by the people who also sought information on Ninetales. Now with knowing this all, the crew had resolved to double their efforts in helping Societe. Now with Societa joining the crew, there was still one surprise left for her. Her childhood friend Yuel was also on board, and Yuel and Societa got to reunite with each other through the crew shortly after everything was said and done. Now that we know how these two came about, we can look into their motives more, and one of the biggest parts to this story of Yuel is the sacred treasures. The sacred treasures are weapons scattered across the skies, and once they are all collected along with the dances that belong to them, it can revive Lady Ninetails. There are a total of 9 sacred treasures, and so far we know that Societa has one, Yuel has the Scarlet Twins, and then we'll have to take a look at another descendant of the royal families. We will be taking a look at Ko, as he has 2 treasures and he possesses both the Scarlet Flash Blade that was handed down by the 9th family, and he also has possession over the Scarlet Robe. Now these items are no joke, as these weapons hold a tremendous power, and if it does not deem you worthy, it will put your soul into eternal flames and it turns it to ashes with no return. Now that we know what the sacred treasures exactly are, I can explain more of the significance behind them in the story, who and what Ko exactly is, and go more in depth about Yuel's background altogether. With the crew and Yuel united as one, it didn't take long for Yuel to find one of these treasures that she's been looking for. She got a hold of the Scarlet Twins, which are dual-bladed swords. And after the recovery of the Scarlet Twins, Yuel and Societa found themselves dancing together, trying to learn the dances that accompanied their weapons, as they were dedicated to Ninetails. However, Yuel found herself in a tough situation whilst practicing the dance, as she heard an unfamiliar voice talking to her in her head, which will be the voice of Ninetails. Ninetails found that she could not perform her dance and came to the conclusion that she had no need for someone who could not successfully execute the dance. This caused Yuel to almost get burned up from the inside out. As we mentioned before, it's the result of weapons who do not deem you worthy. But due to Societa's fast actions, she brought Yuel back in shape, which made her able to learn the dance to Ninetails in the end. As they practice their dances after this encounter with Ninetails, Yuel and Societa both get struck by a sudden vision. In this vision, they witness the sight of a monstrous figure which would appear to be Ninetails. The vision itself showed older members of the royal lineage performing a dancing ritual, turning Ninetails into stone. This vision was very confusing for the both of them, as to them it seemed like they were fighting up against Ninetails with the older successors in the vision that struck them, instead of fighting along with Ninetails as they believed was the right thing to do. The biggest shock here is that both of them had never thought that the one they believed was so righteous would actually look like the monstrous beast that they saw in their vision. This made them question if what they were after was actually right, and if Ninetails was actually something that they should praise instead of trying to get rid of. They could not make up what to believe at this point in time, as they were challenged by a sudden vision that throws all their beliefs and ideology of Ninetails off the table, which is hard to them because considering they grew up believing Ninetails was righteous, as their parents have been praising Ninetails in all his glory in their childhood. They both grew up with the idea that Ninetails was the one they should always praise. What stood out in the vision was the stone, and together they decided to travel to learn more about the stone that Ninetails got turned into as they seen in their vision. And this stone with the remains of Ninetails would be known as the Slaughter Stone. After some time passes, both Yuel and Societa got struck with yet another vision, but this time they both saw the island called Akino, which is the place where Ninetails met her end, as this was the spot where she got turned into the Slaughter Stone. But this time in their vision, they both see a fox-like child standing before that very Slaughter Stone. This was enough to trigger both Yuel and Societa to move as fast as they could to Akino. Now with the both of them on the mission to find out more about the truths and lies behind the story of Ninetails, to uncover the real story as it is, and finding out more about the royal family lineage, and even more so to learn about the fox-like boy they saw in their vision who stood close to the Slaughter Stone. Once they arrived in Akino, it didn't take long for the crew to find the fox-like boy who had appeared in Yuel and Societa's visions. Though after sharing some words, his cold demeanor puts them off, and the boy had enough of the conversation, and after throwing a tantrum on the island, he goes towards the opposite end of Yuel and the others, as he vanishes without a trace. After this weird encounter, they thought it would be a good idea to return to the local village to ask more about the boy that disappeared on them. Whilst chowing down on some food from the local food vendor, the crew discovers how mean-spirited the boy has been towards the villagers as they hear the stories go round. But Societa has something else in mind and feels like something just isn't quite right, as she suggests to look out for the boy once again. As they took up Societa's plan to look for the boy, most of the crew members are shocked after they see the boy wrecking crops in the field of the villagers. They all are very upset and angry with the boy because why would he do that to the villagers? But Societa is the lone exception that didn't jump the gun, and as weird as it sounds to the crew, she mentions that she sees a kindness in him where others don't. The crew catches up with the boy destroying the crops and they have a firm talk with him, but they learn that as crass as his methods may have been, he was simply trying to distance the villagers from the rotten crops and whatever foul thing was causing them to decay. After having finally received a chance to catch up with him for a good chat, they also learned that Ko isn't just a regular boy, as he's actually part of the royal families, which will be the 9th. After this talk, Yuel and Societa convince him to explain himself to the villagers and ask them for forgiveness, showing the side of both Yuel and Societa of forgiveness and gratitude. After everything was said and done, the villagers agreed to forgive Ko as long as he'll set things straight with them. But the one thing that stood out to Ko is that he was surprised at how Yuel and Societa, the descendants of the powerful 1st and 3rd royal families, are so kind to him, even though they don't really have a reason, and he was just a mere part of the lowly 9th royal family. After seeing the reformed Ko help the villagers clear up any misconceptions they might have had about them, Yuel asks what exactly it is that Ko was trying to distance the villagers from. And this is where they do a shocking discovery, as Ko leads them to the Slaughter Stone, aka the fragment of Ninetales. This ended up being the exact scenario both Yuel and Societa had shared earlier on, as they both saw the child in front of the Slaughter Stone in their vision, and this child would end up being Ko. Ko explains that the energy released by the Slaughter Stone puts most of the island in a dangerous state, and was also the reason why the crops were rotting. He describes how the 9th family, unsatisfied with their lowly political status as they were the last out of the rank order of the 9 families, plotted to control the world with Ninetales. They spreaded misinformation about the supposed divinity and righteousness, eventually convincing others to help resurrect Ninetales with the lies as their cover for help. And after Yuel and Societa learn about the true story of Ninetales, they decide to call it a night for that day, to sleep and process everything until the next morning. Whilst Yuel was fast asleep, Societa just couldn't quite rest, as she had an uneasy feeling about Ko and ended up checking in on him late at night. Her feelings were right, because she spots Ninetales leaking from Ko's body in the form of a dark shadow and decides to hide as fast as she could whilst overhearing the conversation between these two. Ko is talking with Ninetales, stating that he's ready to end his life if that means that it would be the end of Ninetales, even though it was the first family who started all the issues after placing the rankings within the families. Hearing this, it kinda broke Societa's heart, and Societa plans to take responsibility for her ancestors' actions, as she's determined to do something about it. Before anyone get to know that she has left late at night, she returns back to the crew and rests throughout the night in order to prepare for the actions the next day. And the moment the early morning arrives, she runs off to the Slaughter Stone all by herself. When the crew notices that she went missing, they come to the conclusion that she must have gone out of bed early to check up on Ko. But as they catch up to her, they see Societa suddenly burst into furious flames right before transforming into the monstrosity that Yuel had seen so many times in her visions. Ninetales, now having overtaken Societa's body, explained that her talk with Ko the night before was merely just a ploy to get Societa to come close to the Slaughter Stone. Whilst going back and forth with the crew about what happened that night, Societa might have lost power over her body, but not her consciousness. Ko's feelings and memories come flooding into her mind, and Societa learns about how Ko was raised to serve as the ultimate vessel for Ninetales. After she sees how poorly Ko got treated, all because her family put the ranks in place, she was willing to bear the end of her life if that meant that Ko could live out his life that he had never had a chance at living. While Societa is dealing with the visions, on the outside the confrontation is still going, and Ninetales exposed that Ko was in on the plan to get Societa to become Ninetales' vessel instead of him. But now that everything has been said and done, he expresses unspeakable regret, and even though Yuel's closest friend got handed the short end of the stick, she still tries to console him. She asks Ko one more time if everything Ninetales had said was true, about fooling everyone in order to have Societa become her vessel in his stead. While tears were rolling down his eyes, he explains that he was just a mere vessel. His only purpose in life was to be offered up to reincarnate Ninetales for his family's sake. He explains that he had no idea how to handle the fact that his life had no other meaning than to become a container for someone else. He figured that once Ninetales put the offer on the table of a replacement vessel after seeing Societa, that this was his chance to be unchained from the 9th family, free of Ninetales' tyranny, and wouldn't have to feel the pain anymore that he's felt all his life. Yuel interrupts him there and asks him how he feels now that everything was been said and done and Ninetales has been free at the cost of Societa. But it didn't take long for him to tell her that he felt even more pain than ever before, and even though he should be free right now, he felt a feeling that he just couldn't bear having. He collapses onto his knees whilst tears were hitting the ground as he apologizes until his words just melt into garbled sounds. And at this point Yuel walks over quietly, crouches down and gently pats his head, and saying that she finally received a proper apology after all his cold responses up until then. She tells him that she won't be the the one that can forgive him, but one person here could, which will be Societa. She tells him to dry his tears and hold himself high, and to be the man she knows he is. After the talk with Yuel, Cole manages to get himself together ever so slightly, and the crew starts thinking of a way to deal with the situation at hand. Cole quickly reveals that the scarlet robe he held onto is actually a sacred treasure, and that can chase Ninetales out of Societa's body. Yuel doesn't hesitate a second and snatches the robe away from him, though they both know that death is promised to those the scarlet robe deems unworthy. But Yuel is quick to say that she's more than willing to take her chances at life and death if that means saving Societa. The crew watches her put it on, only to immediately be put in hellfire. Now that Societa had seemed to be burned up, Ninetales on the loose, and the crew would soon lose Yuel to the same flames as Societa. The captain, which would be either Grun or Jita, risked their life and limp in an attempt to save Yuel. Cole is surprised by how fast the captain was willing to help, even though they know death is at their door. Cole's surprised feelings quickly turn into admiration, and he himself walks towards the burning Yuel after pulling the captain away. Meanwhile, Societa, who is still consumed by Ninetales, has a vision of events from 1,000 years ago. She learns of how Ninetales came to be and her connection with the 9 royal families. The 9 royals sought to eradicate Ninetales with their dances and the sacred treasures, but they only managed to seal the beast away in a form of a stone that was split into 3, which we know today as being the Slaughter Stone. She now finally got to see how the stones got put into existence and how their 1,000-year-old family members put faith in the later generation to put Ninetales to rest for good, as they sacrificed themselves up to put Ninetales into stone as their final effort. Back to the outside world, Ko steps into the hellfire surrounding Yuel with no hesitations left and finds her collapsed on the ground. Before it's too late, he replaces Yuel's soul with his own, thus weakening the flames but also jeopardizing his own life. Even with his soul on the line, he remains confident that Yuel will conquer the sacred treasure's flames. As the crew prays for safety for the both of the successors trapped in the hellfire, Yuel finally walks out with Ko in her arms whilst wearing the scarlet robe. The robe had finally acknowledged her right before it was too late for both her and Ko, and now with newfound resolve, they plan to rescue Societa and to end the tyranny of 1,000 years. Everyone in the crew gets ready to take on the beast and save their friend with everything on the line for one last time. Societa is very close to losing herself in the darkness and on the brink of dying out, but hearing Yuel's voice screaming not to give up gives her strength to fight back until the very last second. And after hearing Yuel's voice, she finds the power to open up her eyes, only to find Yuel gripping her hands ever so tightly, and she gently squeezes back. The risk the crew took only to have a chance at bringing back Societa finally paid off, as Societa is now freed from Ninetales and has her own body back, leading to a heartfelt reunion among the royal descendants. But it takes no longer than a few seconds to get interrupted by Ninetales, who was furious and was ready to put everyone in their grave after the crew ruined the plans of her possessing Societa's body for good. When Yuel gets ready to use one of the dances of Ninetales, Societa stops her. Societa explains the visions she saw while she was consumed by Ninetales, stating that they must use a specific dance, and this dance was the dance of colors, in order to do away with Ninetales forever. And after their final showdown, Ninetales got defeated and the crew is united as one once again, but with an even stronger bond than ever before. And that wraps it up for the story of Yuel. In this video, I prioritized explaining the main story and personality behind her, as this is the most crucial part to knowing about the character itself, as in these events you'll see the character in action. You can see what type of choices they make and what type of personality they really have. So I hope you enjoyed the story of Yuel. Now I currently plan on covering all the characters that are part of the GBVS roster to get this series going, so if you guys have any character in mind that you'd like me to prioritize and to cover, then feel free to let me know in the comments who that character is and why you'd like to know more about them. For me, it's always quite interesting to read up on how certain characters were able to pull the interest of my viewers. Of course, if the series does well, I'd be more than happy to go even deeper down the lore of GBF to cover characters that aren't necessarily part of GBVS. But for now, I will prioritize GBVS, as for most people in the West, GBVS is the first time they've ever heard of Granblue and its characters. So on that note, I will end today's video here. I hope you guys enjoyed the story of Yuel and her friends, and with that, I am out. Hopefully I'll see you guys in my streams or perhaps in the next video. It was your boy Danchou. Stay happy, stay blessed, and I'm out. Peace.